Welcome to Upstart Footy Preview for round 22. This round is being touted as the biggest round of the season because there are so many games that could have a bearing on how the finals look in a couple of weeks' time. I'm Ben Waterworth, and you can breathe a collective sigh of relief here. The man is back in one piece. Didn't bring back any of your sushi, though, which is a bit of a pain, but doesn't matter. Good to see you again, John Takemura.
Good to see you too, Benny, and some big games this round, particularly for the top four and the top eight.
The biggest game of the round, arguably, is the Carlton versus Hawthorn clash tonight at Etihad Stadium. Third versus fourth. If Carlton need to win this one, I should say. If they don't win this one, West Coast basically go ahead of them on the ladder with those extra 2 points. It's going to be tough for the Blues because Hawthorn looked in ominous form last weekend. Buddy and Cyril just awesome. And I think maybe the Blues coming off a 6-day break, coming back from Perth, I think the Hawks might get them here, J-Tac.
Get the binoculars, Benny.
Jeez. J-Tac's attack time.
Carlton, you got to stand up this week. Your record against Hawthorn in recent years has been absolutely terrible. You're playing for a top four spot, and if you lose this game, you can pretty much kiss the top four goodbye, particularly with your bye in round 23. So Carlton really have to win this game to keep themselves in the finals race.
Will they?
Sadly, no. I think Lance Franklin in ominous form last week. Jamison might come back for Carlton, but he hasn't played for 8 weeks. So I reckon Franklin might run him off his legs, and I think Hawthorn in ominous form looking towards the final series.
Saturday afternoon sees the Gold Coast Suns hosting the Adelaide Crows at Metricon Stadium. J-Tac, I don't think you've given the Crows enough credit for their work over the past 3 weeks. They have been fantastic, especially last week against the Cats. They lost by 9 points, but they were ferocious at the contest. Their intensity was absolutely fantastic. And with the Suns crying out for the rest of the season, I'm tipping the Crows quite easily here.
I disagree with you here, Benny. I think obviously the Suns are looking forward to the end of the year. It's been a long year for their first-year players, but this is a game that they've set themselves, and I think they can see that they can win this one, probably one of the more winnable games they've got for the remainder of the year, and Adelaide haven't been impressed with their form away from home all year. They're playing a bit better under Mark Bickley, but I reckon the Suns on a sunny day on the Gold Coast might knock them off.
The second big game of the round is the West Coast Essendon clash on Saturday afternoon. Essendon looked really good in the last couple of weeks, J-Tac, back to some of their best form, particularly against the Dogs last weekend. However, their form away from home, particularly in Perth, is very ordinary. 2 of the last 16 games they've won at Patterson Stadium. I think that trend will continue despite the Eagles' injury list. They're going along very, very nicely and should be too good here.
Yeah, I can't see West Coast dropping this one. Essendon have been good. They were very good last week against my Bulldogs, kicked a really big score. Michael Hurley in good form. Brent Stanton, he was best on ground last week by a mile. He got booed early in the season by his own supporters. Can you believe that?
Bit of a difference now, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think West Coast, they don't want to drop this one for the top four. They've got some players in really good form. Mark Nikoski playing in the forward line. He's been surprising all year.
He could be an X factor come finals time, Nikoski.
Kicked a bag of 6 a couple of weeks ago, and I think they'll win this game well.
The third big game of the weekend is, of course, North Melbourne taking on Fremantle at Etihad Stadium on Saturday night. With Sydney losing last weekend, J-Tac, these two teams now have a bit of extra incentive to win this game. However, the bye came at the right time for North Melbourne. Players starting to get tired towards the end of the season. I think this is good timing for North Melbourne. At Etihad Stadium, where they do their best work against Fremantle, who are horrible in Melbourne, I think the Roos will get this one.
Yeah, sudden death. Both teams, whichever loses, can kiss their finals hopes goodbye. Freo, to me, seem like they're limping to the finish line. Last week against Carlton, they just didn't have the run. Looked too tired. North Melbourne, 18 weeks in a row, but now, you know, they've had the bye to freshen up, and I think they'll win quite well. And extra special treat, if you're listening to 1116 SEN, you can listen to Benny call the third quarter of the match.
The other game on Saturday night is the match at the MCG between Collingwood and the Brisbane Lions. Lions only won 4 games this year, J-Tac, but there have been some really good signs. Have you tried the new burger at McDonald's recently?
No, Benny.
It's called the Lewin Burger. Matty Leuenberger is in magnificent form at the moment. He's going to be a very special ruckman. Unfortunately, though, the Pies will be way too good for the Lions, despite their injuries to Nick Maxwell, the captain. Won't matter too much this week, but might in future weeks. Collingwood very easily on Saturday night.
Yeah, Matty Leuenberger's going to have a tough task, though, against Darren Jolly, one of the premium ruckmen in this competition. And I think it's going to be a pretty one-sided game. Brisbane, they have shown a little bit. They should have beaten the Crows.
Should have, yeah.
In my opinion. But I think Collingwood will win this game by at least 10 goals.
Early game on Sunday afternoon is the match between Sydney and St Kilda at ANZ Stadium. Sydney, one of their worst losses in the past decade, I think, against the Tigers last weekend. Very disappointing. And the Saints, no one wants to play them in the finals series. They'll play finals this year. And at ANZ Stadium, I think the Saints will be too good on the larger ground, and Sydney are in strife. They could possibly miss the top 8 now.
Yeah, St Kilda very impressive against Collingwood. They really pushed them, just couldn't quite take the opportunities when they needed to. Sydney, another team, in my opinion, who are just limping to the finish line. As I said a few weeks ago, it might as well be a final 6 because there's teams just all over the place. Yep. Sydney, Freo, North, etc. And at ANZ Stadium, I think on the big ground, St Kilda will be able to shut them down. And Sydney, I just can't see how they're going to kick a winning score.
Huge blockbuster on Sunday afternoon. Port Adelaide hosting the Western Bulldogs at AAMI Stadium. Well, we've run out of negative adjectives to say about the Port Adelaide Football Club. They are crying out for the end of the season. In fact, they need the end of the season more than a 2-month-old baby needs their mother's care at the moment. They need a rest, big time. I think the Dogs showed good signs last weekend, unfortunately just a little too late, I think. But they'll be too good for the Power on the weekend. Yeah,
it depends on the Dogs' motivation now that they're out of the final series. A couple of big injuries. Dale Morris obviously broke his leg. Ryan Hargrave hurt his back. And Adam Cooney's been scratched for the season. Yep. So a few key players out. But I think Port Adelaide, we've seen they've been in pretty ordinary form the last 2 weeks. Lack of intensity, lack of effort. And Matthew Primus is nearly at the end of his tether, I think. So if Port Adelaide don't lose this game by at least 10 goals, I'll be very surprised. And I think the Bulldogs really got to show something this week.
The final game of round 22 is the battle of the rest, with Melbourne taking on Richmond at the MCG on Sunday afternoon. The D's haven't shown anything since the change of coach Jay Tack, while the Tigers, a really good win last week against the Swans with Cochin, Martin, Vickery, Rance all playing really good games. That extra motivation, they're an emotional team, the Tigers. I think the Tigers might get the D's here.
Yeah, Tigers played very well last week, but I think Melbourne, they showed a couple of good signs. You said they showed
just
nothing.
A few.
Jeremy Howe, I thought, played very well.
Yes.
Sam Blease did a bit.
Yes.
And I think there's still a little flicker of hope that they can make the finals. So I think Melbourne, MCG, they play a lot better there than they do at Etihad Stadium. I think they'll beat Richmond.
Yeah, fair point. Sometimes I hate arguing with you, J-Tac. That's not the point, though. And Geelong, of course, have the bye. Thanks for tuning in to Upstart Footy Preview. A big special thanks, of course, to our viewers on bigfooty.com. We do appreciate you tuning in. He's back, and he's back better than ever. Good to see you again, J-Tac.
Good to see you too, Benny.
And make sure you stick around on upstart.net.au, of course, the magazine for emerging journalists.